perfect weekend getaway? Love Lansing like a local. And we promise, you'll love Lansing just as much as we do.
You're watching My Michigan TV.
It's time for Lehto Live. Join author, historian, radio host, and YouTube sensation Steve Lehto as he breaks down Michigan's top stories, talks with business leaders and professional experts, and checks out the variety of statewide festivals and events that Michigan has to offer. You're watching Lehto Live on My Michigan TV.
Welcome to My Michigan Television. I'm Steve Lehto. It is a Friday, and I can't say we're digging out from under the storm, but we are getting out from underneath the effects of the ice storm we had a couple days ago. Right now, it's 20 degrees outside. High today is going to be 23. My driveway is still iced over, and I couldn't remove it with a shovel. I'm just going to wait till the weather does its part tomorrow when it hits 37 and gets sunny. Problem, of course, is Monday they're calling for freezing rain, so we might have more of this going on. It's going to be a while because, of course, that's what Michigan winters do. They linger. They linger. So Charles Ramirez writes for Detroit News that DTE continues to restore power, and they're hoping to get 95% of people back online by Sunday. So by Sunday, 95% of DTE customers should have power if things go as planned. Right now, they've got ideal conditions to be repairing this stuff. It's just that there is so much work to do. DTE Electrics and crews are working to restore power to roughly 200,000 customers who've lost power since Friday. The utility continues to push to get 95% of its customers back online by the end of Sunday. Trevor Lauer, DTE Electric president and COO, said during a virtual news conference earlier today, we're going to do everything possible to get to that 95% number by Sunday. That's still our goal. More than 460,000 DTE customers are without power following the storm, which of course is Wednesday and Thursday, that brought down a brutal mix of sleet, ice, snow, wind, and rain. The electric company serves 2.3 million customers in southeastern Michigan and up into the thumb. Consumers Energy, meanwhile, said as of this morning, it has 480 crews out in the field, including more than 100 from 4 other states working to get power restored. I mentioned it yesterday. One of the things I admire about the power industry is that if a power company in one state needs help because it's an emergency, other states, power companies will step up and help out, knowing that down the road it could be reversed. So the storm brought down more than 8,000 lines that were run by consumers, and nearly 189,000 of their customers were still in the dark as of this morning. Today, consumers officials said a majority of affected customers should be restored by Sunday. The restoration work could continue and be largely completed by the end of the day, Monday. So some people, unfortunately, will not have power until Monday, the end of the day. Consumers have 6.7 million gas and electric customers across Michigan. Our crews are working around the clock to get power back to customers as quickly and as safely as possible, said Norm Capella, one of the Consumer Energy's officers in charge, in a press release earlier today. We still have a long way to go, But as our teams continue to work together to clear debris and assess damage, the restoration work will only speed up. We're grateful for the patience and understanding of our customers as our crews continue their hard work. So I've got friends, two of whom lost power. One of them showed me photographs of branches that fell, and some of the branches weren't that large, but she said that when one of them fell, she thought there had been a car accident in front of her house because she heard this loud crashing noise. She went out there and looked, and it's just a big chunk of a tree that fell over. So today, Lauer said about 100,000 of its customers in the areas affected by the storm lost power Thursday due to ice on trees, power lines, and infrastructure. These are areas that have been hit particularly hard, especially in Washtenaw and Livingston counties. That's where we're seeing the most extensive damage, where you had the heaviest ice in those areas that exceeded a half an inch. And we were talking about this yesterday, that when you get ice on a wire, you get a half inch of ice, you go, how much could that possibly weigh? Well, across the length of the wire from one pole to the next, it can be up into the thousands of pounds. And so that's a lot of weight. It's deceptive because you don't think, well, ice isn't that heavy. Well, that's a lot of ice, believe it or not, when it's the full length of the cable. Despite that, DTE crews were able to restore power to about 160,000 customers yesterday. Lauer said the company will bring an additional manpower to help with restoration efforts and aims to turn the power on for 200,000 more customers today. So we have over 3,400 people actively working in the field, working on restoration activities, and we have additional crews coming in from out of state to work on this process with us today. So I'm hoping for a good day today. I want to make a big knock in the storm to get a big chunk of our customers back. Crews' number one priority is public safety, and they're focusing on downed wires and infrastructure that could pose a danger. So their number one job is to take care of the dangerous situations. Number two job is to get the power on. Obviously, a downed line, when you fix that, will get the power back onto somebody, you'd think, or eventually it will. But they have to be careful. We mentioned yesterday a firefighter in Paw Paw got killed because of a downed line. So they then address restoring power to customers who need power for life support, such as people on oxygen or warming centers or nursing homes and critical care facilities. After that, the target is the largest swaths where customers are without electricity. So they'll prioritize it. And so the emergency stuff is first. And then second is when they can get the biggest groups of people back online. Lauer also said that beginning on Saturday, crews will begin to focus on restoring service to schools left in the dark by the storm. We want to make sure that all schools are open back on Monday. So we will start to prioritize all of the schools that are out of power on Saturday and Sunday to make sure that we know all the schools can have their power back on. Meanwhile, repair crews' biggest challenge was the ice, which made it difficult to climb utility poles. However, the ice started to melt by about 3 o'clock yesterday. So like I said, my driveway was covered with this coating of, it's not even an inch thick, but it's like a combination of ice and snow, but the way it fell, it formed like this covering. And I can walk on top of it, and occasionally it crunches, but it's snow and ice. I don't know how else to describe it. Meanwhile, the challenges are frustrating customers. And dogs also left in yards cause problems because crews must enter to make repairs. So they understand that homeowners are frustrated, but keep in mind that crews have to make sure it's safe to conduct their work. So please, if you see a DTE crew in the area, bring your dog inside. And don't give me this, oh, he's friendly. The number of times I've heard people say that they were told a dog was friendly right before it bit them. And don't get me wrong, I love dogs. I do. But I don't blame dogs for having a hostile reaction to a group of strangers coming into their yard dressed funny. And that's what a DTE crew looks like to a dog. The dog doesn't know who those people are or why they're here. So get your dog inside. The voltage of electricity that we use in a system like DTE's is unforgiving, he said. They have to make sure there's no electricity so they can do the restoration activities in a safe manner, and we can get then the electricity flowing back for all customers. Michigan residents slammed by the ice storm that downed thousands of power lines and plunged more than 500,000 people into the dark. Spent Thursday morning digging out, cleaning up tree branches, and chipping ice away from cars, though utility providers urged caution. The storm downed thousands of power lines across Michigan. Now, DTE's got 2.3 million customers, Michigan in the thumb. They estimated they had 3,200 power lines down that they had to fix and get back up again. Many of them were coated thick with ice, and consumers said that they had 5,700 power lines brought down by the storm. So each one of those power lines means that somebody, a crew, has got to come out and look at it, make sure the power is shut off at whichever end is still connected, then reconnect it, and then get the power going again. So 3,200 for one company, 5,700 for the other company. So you're approaching 9,000 there. In Pleasant Ridge, 2 large tree branches snapped over 2 separate houses on Woodward Heights. A 20-foot branch broke off and landed on a Dodge Ram truck, causing a dent. According to the homeowner, a city maintenance worker came and chopped off the wood to free the truck. In Dearborn Heights, Barbara and Richard Dennis's home on Monroe near West Outer Drive was covered in fallen frozen branches Thursday morning. A new neighbor came by and offered to help them clean up their yard, which was nice of them. They said, "We've lived here for 28 years, never seen anything like it. We've had limbs fall down before, but I didn't think we'd get this much," said Barbara, who is 74 years old. "My son is coming today from St. Clair Shores because he does not have power. And my daughter doesn't have power in Woodhaven." Her daughter said she heard the largest tree branch fall Wednesday night. "It was so loud, I thought it was a crash right outside the home," which is exactly what my friend said about the branch falling in front of her house. Barbara and her husband attempted cleaning the yard themselves, but the branches were large and heavy, and some not yet fully detached from the tree. Soon enough, a new neighbor assisted with ladders and saws, and the Good Samaritan wished to remain anonymous when asked who he was. "We didn't expect anyone to help, but this new neighbor kindly offered. We're not used to it because people just don't do that anymore," Barbara said. "We were going to do it ourselves, but thankfully not." And I can tell you that I have chainsaws, and I like it when people ask me if I can help. Now, nobody asked me to help this time around, so the chainsaws did not come out. But I did make the offer to a couple of friends yesterday, and I said, "Hey, you got no power, you're welcome at my place because I got power." And the funny thing is that no one took me up on that either. But a couple of years ago, people in southeastern Michigan will remember that there was a time when there's a big power outage that blanketed southeast Michigan, I believe Ohio, and parts of Pennsylvania. And at first they thought it was some kind of terrorist activity. And then it turned out that no, it was actually just a weird fluke in the power grid that caused the entire grid to go down because of a bunch of circuits flipping out and doing the wrong things. And there was no power for a long period of time because of that. And it was right in the middle of summertime. It was not a brownout or blackout or anything like that. It was literally a failure of the power grid. And a good friend of mine was in town from Alaska, and he was visiting his relatives in the Birmingham Bloomfield area. And at the time, I actually lived, and this is the funniest thing ever, where the line was that the power outage went to, I lived right on the other side of it. And so the day that the power went out, I remember being stuck in traffic trying to get home, and every road I went down, all the lights were malfunctioning. So it's 4-way stops everywhere. So it took forever for me to get home. And as I'm coming home, I remember when I crossed the line and all of a sudden I come to a working stoplight. And I'm like, wait a second, I might have power. And I did. I had power. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I wonder if it's going to stay on. It stayed on. And I just happened to live right across the border where the power failed. And so my friend's in town and we were going to get together and do something. And we were just chit-chatting, and he goes, "Well, I'm not sure what we're going to be able to do now because we're stuck at this house. There's no power. I got my kids. We can't take showers." I go, "I got all that stuff. Come on over." So he goes, "Really?" I go, "Yeah." He goes, "This is going to sound kind of weird, but can we take showers at your house?" I go, I bet you can. Like, I don't care. It's a guy I've known since 5th grade. So he shows up at our house and he's, got his wife and his kids, and they all come inside. And I go, dude, showers up those stairs, just knock yourself out, and put out a bunch of clean towels. Family all took showers. We all sat in an air-conditioned living room and acted like we were kings because we still had power. So that's pretty cool. We're going to talk a little bit more about this storm in just a second, right after this on My Michigan Television.
We've all been looking forward to a return to normalcy, especially when it involves a breath of fresh air, a dip in the water, the chance to explore, or just the opportunity to take a break and enjoy the view. Our time is now. Start making your plans now to visit Ludington at pureludington.com.
We are connected to our Lake Huron shoreline, all 93 miles of it. Hidden bays and marinas dot our shores. Points of entry to our world. Open waters and waves, alive with people at play. Inspiration floats on sparkling waves. We are in awe of its strength and in love with its allure. We nurture it, play in it, savor it. Huron County Waters.
Welcome back to My Michigan Television. I'm Steve Lehto. I've mentioned that a couple of times, that blackout that happened a couple of years ago, and I know more than a couple of years ago, but it's been so long, and I thought to myself, I wonder exactly when that was. I was guessing the early 2000s, and I looked it up, and it turns out it actually has its own Wikipedia entry. It was the Northeast blackout of 2003. The Northeast blackout of 2003 was a widespread power outage throughout parts of the northeastern and midwestern U.S. and most parts of Ontario. So it happened in Canada also. I'd forgotten about that. And it lasted from 2 to 4 days, depending on location. And it was in August of 2003. There you go. So I remember this vividly because, like I said, I was driving home from my office when it struck. And likewise, my friend was in town when it struck. And so him and his family came over. And like I said, they used our facilities and hung out. And we got to spend our time together. And that was a time that he and I got to spend together. So he'd come back to Michigan to visit all kinds of people. And I was one of the people on his list. And we got to hang out because of the fact that we were letting him take part of the fact that we had power. Imagine that. Meanwhile, both DTE and consumers urged homeowners to be cautious around down lines. We cannot emphasize this enough. That contributed to the death of a Paw Paw firefighter on Wednesday. And downed power lines actually confuse people because sometimes they look like or blend in with sticks. It's just a black cable laying on the ground, and there's other branches nearby. You might not see it, so be very, very careful. One of Consumer Energy's officers in charge urged people to stay at least 25 feet away from downed power lines. Keep your children away and keep your pets away. Don't let the pets run loose if there's downed lines and stuff run nearby. Report the issue. They say it's even okay to call 911. If you can't get through to somebody at Consumers or DTE, you can call 911 because a downed line is an emergency. So you want to go out into your backyard, you want to clean that up, I'm going to tell you don't, says Mike Shaw with the Michigan State Police. He's a lieutenant. Our biggest concern that we'll have now going into the future is people losing their lives by touching a downed power line. They look like sticks. They can hide anywhere. They can be touching a branch. They can be touching a car, anything metal, or in a puddle. And that's the problem. Electricity does funny things. And you don't have to actually pick it up and mess with it for it to kill you. You step on it. it could get you. Or if it's touching something that you touch, depending on what it is, that could also get you. Be very, very careful. Err on the side of caution, as they say. Businesses and residents in Metro Detroit who still had power Thursday morning, meanwhile, were especially grateful for it, as was I. The city of Dearborn's first responders began distributing free dry ice to Dearborn residents at 2 p.m. on Reckinger Road between the Centennial Library and the Dearborn Police Department. While other Metro Detroiters assessed their losses Thursday, Deborah Cummings of Madison Heights was counting her blessings. She works in the cafeteria of a school that was closed Thursday and was home at about 10 a.m. when she said she heard a crash outside her window. They looked outside, and a tree had fallen on their porch and damaged their porch. She said planning ahead Wednesday night helped her avoid further damage or inconvenience. When it started to storm on Wednesday, I told Frank to move the car up as far as it would go because they were saying the ice in the trees might cause branches to fall. And there's a tree right there. Sure enough, if he hadn't moved it, the tree would have hit it. Think about those happenstance things in life where if you've got a driveway that could theoretically fit 4 or 5 cars, and you have one car there and a tree hits it, you walk out and you look at it and go, wow, if I parked here, it wouldn't have hit. Back here, it wouldn't have hit. Right there, it hit. And, sometimes you can't avoid this stuff, but sometimes, if you plan ahead, you can. So she said he'll have to replace a board on the porch where the tree hit it, but it's no biggie. It could have been a whole lot worse. It's no biggie. It ain't no thing. So Rose Battle of Taylor also is philosophical about her situation, including the prospect of not having power until Sunday. She said she was cooking spaghetti about 9 p.m. Wednesday when the lights went out. DTE told me it might be Sunday before we get our power back. She said she has food in her refrigerator. She doesn't want it to spoil, but it's cold out, so I can always set the food outside. And that would work, by the way. And I remember the last time I lost power was in the middle of the summer. I think there was a thunderstorm that went through, knocked down a few power lines, nothing major. I remember the outage map was just a few little spots, but I happened to be in one of them. So I remember logging on and saying, how long, and send me notices and so on. And they sent me the thing saying that, oh, by the way, we'll update you for however often, we get updates and let you know when your power will be back on. And I realized and did the math that I had ice cream in the freezer. And I couldn't take it and put it outside because it's hot outside. So I remember making the mental calculations at one point saying, okay, that ice cream is going to ruin and spoil unless I eat it now. And I wouldn't want that ice cream to pass on without having fulfilled its potential. So I remember sitting there eating this big thing of ice cream. But according to DTE's outage map, dozens of homes in the Royal Oak Huntington Woods border were without power, although Bruce Swancut's house was not affected. He said, if it does go out, I'm not worried. Leading the way to his backyard where a home generator flashed a green light. I bought it a couple years ago. It's a great investment. I used to have a portable generator. When the power went out, my neighbor would have to run an extension cord from his place, but not anymore. And I actually did use a generator one time. A couple of years ago, I lost my power, different house than the one I was just talking about. And I was commenting about this to one of my friends. He goes, well, I've got a generator if you want to borrow it. And I said, well, how big is it? I don't know how to hook it up. And he goes, well, if nothing else, you can plug your refrigerator into it. I'm like, oh, okay. So put the generator on the back porch, ran in the cord, plugged in the refrigerator, and kept the refrigerator going, which was fine. So didn't have to keep the generator running for hours on end or anything like that. You would just run it for a little while, make sure the refrigerator got up to temperature, and then you could shut it off and do that again. So consumers and DTE both said that they are closely monitoring the weather forecast in days ahead. Consumers said strong wind gusts and tree branches moving as ice melts could cause further damage. Once the winds get over 40 miles an hour, our crews are no longer able to go up in buckets and work in elevated conditions. A storm wreaked havoc across the country, but especially the Midwest, where a wintry mix hit the Dakotas, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Weather contributed to more than 1,200 flights being canceled. 1,200. We're so grateful to be on Eastern Market Proper's stable power grid today, said Well Done Goods, a store near Eastern Market, in a post on Facebook. So if you don't have power, sit tight. It's going to come back on. If you do have power, be thankful. You go outside to clean up stuff. Make sure there are no power lines down because they can blend in. And that, unfortunately, is the bad thing that can happen in these situations. There are thousands of crews out right now trying to, thousands of men out there right now trying to get this power turned back on. And so they'll get to it when they get to it. And someday we'll all look back on this and go, oh, I remember with an ice storm back in 2023. Now, we've, of course, been talking about that shooting that happened at Michigan State University last week. And, of course, 3 people perished, 5 were injured, taken to the hospital. The gunman was apparently dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. But of the 5 students that were in the hospital, first and foremost, you have to mention that MSU has stepped up and said, we will pay their medical bills. We'll pay their medical bills. So they don't need to worry about medical bills. But, of course, they got other issues. And so they've identified a few of them, but not all of them. And one of them has now been discharged from the hospital. So one of them is out. So the first of 5 students injured at the MSU shooting has been discharged from the hospital, according to police. Beth LeBlanc wrote this for the Detroit News. The first of 5 hospitalized after the February 13th shooting at Michigan State University has been discharged and sent home, according to MSU police. The student has not been identified in the update and had been previously listed in serious condition. The student is now good enough to get out of the hospital, has not been identified. And again, I've got no problem with that. Unfortunately, we live in a society where people get thrust into the news, whether they like it or not. And in a situation like this, that's a choice you make. And if you decide not to let people know who you are, that's fine. That's absolutely fine. The student's release leaves 4 other students still receiving care at Sparrow Hospital in Lansing, one of whom is in fair condition, 2 are in serious but stable, and 1 is still in critical condition. The students were injured and 3 others killed on February 13th when a gunman identified by police as a 43-year-old opened fire at Berkey Hall and the Union on MSU's campus. After an hours-long lockdown on campus, the man shot himself when he was approached by police in the city of Lansing, about 4 miles from the university campus in East Lansing. And those killed included 19-year-old Ariel Anderson of Harper Woods, 20-year-old Brian Frazier of Grosse Pointe, and 20-year-old Alexandria Werner of Clawson. Michigan State has declined to identify the others who are injured but have still not been identified, but has vowed to pay for their hospital expenses and the funeral expenses of the 3 students who were killed. I'd not caught that earlier, but apparently they'll pay the funeral expenses as well. Online fundraisers for 3 of the injured individuals have identified them as MSU juniors Nate Statley, Guadalupe Hapia Perez, and 20-year-old John Howe, whose roommate has said he was paralyzed from the chest down from a bullet that hit his spinal cord. Howe, his fundraising page said, is an international student from China working toward a career in sports management who was shot in the spine. Statley, according to the online fundraiser, is studying environmental biology and zoology and was in critical condition as of Wednesday morning. Apia Perez is studying hospitality business and was shot twice during the attack, according to her fundraising page. So the guy who got identified yesterday was Statley. He is the one who is from the Heartland area. And I mentioned before, my brother used to live in Heartland. I know that area very well. But of course, it is an absolute travesty and shame that you could go to a class on campus and somebody would come in and start shooting. And it's really difficult to go in and talk about some of these things because on the one hand, when something like that happens, it is so tragic and unspeakable that you have to look at it and go, okay, this is just horrific. But then you say, oh, and the weird part, and there's all kinds of weird parts here, but one of the weirdest parts of all is the guy had no connection to Michigan State University. He had zero connection other than he just simply lived a few miles away. So it's not like this was somebody who was a student or a former student or an employee of the school, or and that kind of lack of logic, and I hate to call, I don't know what else to call it, but that's what, we like to see things that happen in the world and look at them and go, okay, I understand that, or I can explain that, or I get that, or somehow there's some logic to it. And you look at a situation like this and it becomes senseless. But the word senseless is thrown around so much, or nonsense is thrown around so much, that it loses the meaning of what the word actually means. And you think about this, but there's a guy, 43-year-old man, who lives in Lansing, which is near East Lansing. And for some unknown reason, goes over to Michigan State University with a rifle and starts shooting the place up. And so there are students sitting in class, 100% innocent, and something they could never have predicted by somebody they didn't know happens like that. And every single thing about this story makes no sense, except that it happened, and it's a tragedy, and there's people who've got to deal with it. So obviously, you've got families that lost loved ones, 3 families. You've got 5 families dealing with injured loved ones. And then the survivors themselves have got to move on. And now they might be able to return to class and finish their studies and go on with their lives. But it would be very, very difficult, as you can imagine, to suffer something that traumatic and then go right back and start classes again. I mean, so I hear this story, and I remember watching it unfold. And in particular, because of all the connections I have and friends of mine have with Michigan State University, that it really did hit me harder than when I hear about something like this happening in a different state. And don't get me wrong, there was a shooting at Virginia Tech a few years ago. I remember hearing about that and going, oh, how senseless is this, But it's just one of those things, after a while, we start hearing about these shootings happening so often that we do start to get numb to it. And that's a danger, because we shouldn't get numb to it. It shouldn't happen, and we should be allowed to look at it and go, that's crazy. But short of contributing money and, good wishes, there's not much else you can do. But as of right now, the university is going to pay for the funerals of the dead, medical bills of the survivors, and then there's GoFundMes set up for several of the survivors also, because they're going to need more help than just their medical bills. So keep that in mind, and maybe check those things out. And again, there's at least 2 people who have not been yet identified. And we may never necessarily find out who they are. They don't have to speak to the press. But it's interesting to watch the story unfold. And I'll continue following it as best I can. So we will stop talking about it today, but if anything else happens, we'll pick it up next week. Meanwhile, I'm going to talk about some of that payroll protection plan money scamming that happened right here in Michigan after this on My Michigan Television.
My Michigan TV is streaming everywhere on Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV, and more smart TV apps. My Michigan TV is on your phone too. Take us with you wherever you go. Just search for My Michigan TV on your favorite app store or visit mymitv.com. All Michigan, streaming everywhere. My Michigan TV.
Kalamazoo Craft Beverage Week has brought so many events to our community.
Has been such an incredible benefit to local area bars and breweries like ours.
I think just the fact that there is such a thing is pretty special for our community.
To taste great craft beer, craft wine, craft spirits in the Kalamazoo community and see what we really have to offer.
It's been an awesome opportunity to see everyone come together again and just enjoy the craft beverage scene.
No matter where you choose to go for Kalamazoo Craft Beverage Week, you won't be disappointed.
Don't miss out! Download the My Michigan TV mobile app to stay up to date with all of our programming.
You'll recall that during COVID, the government stepped up and had a bunch of plans and programs where companies could apply for loans from the government, and the government lent you the money. You could then have that loan forgiven if you kept some people employed during COVID. And so it was a thing that tied over businesses, right? It made sense. Well, unfortunately, it looks like a huge portion of the money that was poured into that program was just stolen by fraudsters. And I've talked a lot about this on and off for the last couple of years, but this one hit the news yesterday. My good friend Tom sent it to me. And an ex-officer has been sentenced in a pandemic relief fund scheme that involved a plot with residents of Michigan. So I've seen these happen all around the country. There was a lot of them in Florida and California. But this one has a connection to Michigan. Mark Hicks of the Detroit News writes that a former Georgia police officer has been sentenced to 59 months in prison for his part in a plot with Michigan residents to launder $500,000 in fraudulently obtained COVID-19 relief funds. And that's federal officials in a press release they issued yesterday, Department of Justice. During sentencing in the U.S. District Court for the Western District of Michigan in Grand Rapids, the judge noted that the man's behavior was greedy and concerning, according to the U.S. Attorney's Office statement. The man was a con artist who tried to exploit the COVID-19 pandemic for his own personal gain, said the U.S. attorney. Anyone who tries to get rich quick by stealing money intended to help those in need should expect to be held fully accountable. I know people who ran businesses and applied for loans and didn't get the money because they said, we've run out of money. We've already given it away. And it turns out a lot of it was given away to people like this who stole it. The man also faces 3 years of supervised release after he gets out of prison. He was the fifth defendant sentenced in the case, according to court records. In December, a man from Grand Rapids was sentenced to 87 months. Judge ordered him to spend 6 years on supervised release after his confinement and pay almost $1.5 million in restitution. And the question, of course, is, does he have that money? Authorities found that back in 2020, the men got together, several of them from Michigan, one of them from Georgia, and they helped the men prepare bogus applications for Paycheck Protection Program loans, PPP, authorized by the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or the CARES Act. And the man and his co-conspirators exploited the program to obtain approximately $1.495 million in fraud proceeds. Afterwards, the man attempted to launder some of the proceeds by directing two of his confederates to wire $500,000 to an overseas bank account that the man had selected. And this is what we call a trap for the stupid, because any time banks transfer, handle, or basically see $10,000 or more, they are required to report it to the feds. And the feds want to know for two reasons. One is the IRS wants to make sure they get their taxes if it's income. But two, the feds want to make sure there's not a crime going on. And so when someone suddenly comes into $500,000 that they're wiring to an overseas bank account, somebody who goes, well, gee, now let's see, here's how it works. Is that number larger or smaller than $10,000? It's larger. Okay, notify the feds. Investigators from the Drug Enforcement Administration detected the plot, and the IRS froze the bank accounts, recovering approximately $1.123 million. Pandemic relief funds in the forms of PPP loans were established to help legitimate businesses get through the economic crisis created by COVID-19, said Charles Miller, acting special agent in charge of IRS criminal investigations, Detroit. In concert with the U.S. Attorney's Office and our federal law enforcement partners, the IRS, CI, will continue to track down individuals who attempt to exploit the federal relief program for their own personal greed and hold them accountable for their crimes. Jackson, 57 years old, worked as an officer in Clayton County, Georgia, until he was charged with this crime. He pleaded guilty in October to attempting to engage in a monetary transaction in property derived from specified unlawful activity, as well as aiding and abetting therein. In a sentencing memorandum filed this month, his attorney noted that the man is an Army veteran diagnosed with PTSD and other issues, and he had already been incarcerated for nearly 2 years. So I'm sure they'll probably give him some credit for the time served. The man does not diminish the seriousness of the charged offense and clearly has demonstrated that he accepts responsibility for his actions. He has expressed that he takes full responsibility and accountability. Furthermore, he regretted his actions that landed in front of this court. He maintains that his involvement in this conspiracy was minimal. Others have faced charges related to pandemic aid, theft, or fraud in Michigan. This month, a Commerce Township man was charged in connection with applying for nearly $1 million worth of pandemic loans for fake businesses. A Detroit man also was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison in connection with schemes to seize more than $2.2 million in COVID-19 pandemic aid and to defraud the U.S. Postal Service of more than $200,000. Meanwhile, last year, a former Michigan unemployment insurance examiner and 3 others were indicted by a federal grand jury in connection with an alleged scheme to steal more than $1 million in benefits. A state audit has found the unemployment insurance agency lost more than $8.5 billion to suspected fraudulent payments amid record claims and persistent attempts at fraud. Since 2020, the Secret Service has initiated more than 3,850 pandemic-related fraud investigations and seized more than, ready for this? $1.4 billion in fraudulently obtained funds. So they've gotten $1.4 billion back. How much have they not gotten back? That's the scary part. And the weird part, like I said, is there were legitimate companies out there that were having a really difficult time. And they applied for the loans and they were told, money's all gone. And the way they did the system was federal government said, we're putting the money up, but we're going to let banks administer it. And the banks would get a fee, they get a portion for every loan that they handled. And so a lot of people could go into a bank with really shoddy documentation and get the loans because the bank says, well, we're just loaning the money. There was nothing to come back and get the bank if they did a bad job of this, apparently, because I've not yet heard of any banks being prosecuted, but we've heard stories about like, oh yeah, it turns out that one address, which is a vacant house, had 48 businesses supposedly operating out of it because it's being used by all these fraudsters as the location of their business that needed the PPP money. And you're telling me that nobody could do the legwork to discover that this business is operating out of a vacant house, and 47 other businesses are as well. And I actually have spoken to people who pushed back on that and said, oh, Steve, it was such an emergency. They had to get the money out. You can't spend one day verifying basic stuff. So for instance, there were people who would say, I've got 17 employees. I've got 17 employees. I need money for their payroll. All you had to do was show us the records where you made tax payments on their behalf on withholding, for instance. If you've got 17 employees, you'd have tax records, right? You'd have payroll records, wouldn't you? Of course you would. And they didn't bother asking for any of that basic stuff. So we've heard of stories about people like who, for instance, like are in prison and somehow got money. People who were in other countries who got money. Turns out a lot of the money went to like Europe and Asia, and you'd think if you're claiming to run a business in Michigan, that the money be getting sent to, oh, I don't know, Michigan. And so there's 2 ways of looking at this. And one of them is, it was so easy to steal the money that it's a shame that it got stolen. It's a shame that they set the program up that way. It's a shame all the way around. But it was also so easy to steal it that the people stealing it were not super criminal masterminds. And many of them, like this group here, did things so dumb afterwards that they got caught and the money got intercepted and retrieved. So that's good, I guess. But it's scary that they made the money that easy to steal in the first place. And apparently there were guys just sitting at computers, hammering away, filling out applications, just filing, and just getting money. And of course, that's our tax dollars, hard at waste. And so add that on top of the pile of all the other debts that the government's got that somehow someone's got to pay. And it's maddening. So I'm glad they caught these guys. And I do find it amusing that they got caught because they tried to wire $500,000 to an overseas bank account. And it didn't dawn on them that that would put them on somebody's radar. So there you go. Meanwhile, I'm going to talk about pizzas in a second, but I got to tell you a funny story. About 2 or 3 weekends ago, it was Saturday or Sunday. I forgot which day of the week it was. But it was a weekend evening, about 6, 7 o'clock. Decided to order a pizza. 2 or 3 different pizza places I routinely order from that I have fine service with, and I know some of the delivery drivers and all that stuff. So went online and looked at it, and it says, if you order right now, it'll be 45 minutes. You'll have the pizza in 45 minutes. So I put the order together, hit send, enter, and I make a note mentally, 45 minutes, pizza should show up. 45 minutes later, I'm thinking to myself, I wonder where the pizza is. And I log onto the website, and they got a tracker. And they have a thing that actually says, here's where your pizza is. And it goes, your pizza's on the road right now. I'm like, okay, cool. It's going to be here any second now. 15 minutes goes by, and I don't live 15 minutes from the pizza place. And I think to myself, pizza should have been here by now. What's going on? So call the pizza place. And the manager gets on the phone and goes, it's on the road. Well, the tracker says it was on the road half an hour ago. We called this in over an hour ago. And she goes, no, it'll be there any minute now. It's on the road right now. It'll be there any minute now. Like, oh, okay. Okay, thanks. No explanation as to why it's running so late. So another half hour goes by. So this is now like, let's see, 45 plus 15, half hour, hour and a half after ordering the pizza. Call back. Manager gets back on the phone, goes, oh, it's on the road right now. Well, that's what you said last time. Oh, you called before? Yes. Spoke to you. You said it was on the road. Meanwhile, the tracker still says it's on the road. And by the way, those trackers are nonsense. They're not actually hooked to anything. The tracker is an estimate based on when you called. That's all it is. That's all it is. And that, by the way, ought to be illegal. But anyways, pizza's not here. You keep telling us that. It's an hour and a half since we ordered it. Should we just cancel the order? And the woman goes, no. She goes, here's the deal. I'll cancel your order so you won't get charged, but you can just keep the pizza when it gets there. I go, okay, I guess, right? About 10 minutes later, a guy pulls up the driveway. I go walking up to meet him, and the guy goes, dude, I'm so sorry. And he starts apologizing. And I go, well, I understand it's not your fault, right? And he goes, no. He goes, our manager will not ever tell anybody it's more than 45 minutes for the pizza. He goes, we're so backed up right now, it takes 2 hours. We're telling everybody 45 minutes. Because there's another franchise, the exact same company, 2 miles the other way. I live right in the middle. He goes, if we said it's going to be more than 45 minutes, the computer would kick the order back to the other store. We'd lose the order. He goes, so our manager keeps resetting that thing to keep whatever she's doing to keep it from never going above 45 minutes. He goes, I'm so sorry. He goes, it's not my fault. He goes, it's the manager's fault. I go, is the pizza cold? The guy goes, no, it's not. It's fine. I go inside. It was ice cold. Ice cold. Now I got it for free, but I don't order from them anymore. And that's the crazy thing. So here's the deal. The pizza business is something I'm both fascinated by and mortified by for a variety of reasons. And Domino's Pizza, which, by the way, is headquartered in Michigan, as is Little Caesars and a bunch of other pizza places. Domino's Pizza is in the news, and it's not good news, but it just reminded me of the story I just told you. We're going to talk about Domino's Pizza in the news right after this on My Michigan Television.
Looking for the perfect weekend getaway? Love Lansing like a local. And we promise, you'll love Lansing just as much as we do.
We are connected to our Lake Huron shoreline, all 93 miles of it. Hidden bays and marinas dot our shores. Points of entry to our world. Open waters and waves, alive with people at play. Inspiration floats on sparkling waves. We are in awe of its strength and in love with its allure. We nurture it, play in it, savor it. Huron County Waters.
Pure is what you make of it. It's feeling the sun warm your skin and a cool lake wash away your cares. Pure is turning a lighthouse into your North Star and letting a ride through the woods turn into dinner by the shore. It's taking it all in and never taking anything for granted. The sun sets, the moon rises, and you realize the end of one perfect summer day is the beginning of another. Pursue your Pure in Pure, Michigan.
Domino's Pizza in the news. Their stock dropped in value, and it was the biggest drop in a decade, largely caused by problems with delivery and soft demand. I will tell you right now that the pizza place I was talking about in the last story was not Domino's. It was not Domino's, but it was one of the big ones that you've heard of. So Janet Freund writes for the Bloomberg news agency that Domino's Pizza stock tumbled the most in more than a decade as delivery problems and softening demand caused fourth quarter sales to fall way short of Wall Street expectations and led management to cut targets for revenue growth. Shares of the pizza chain fell 12% on Thursday. One day, 12%. The steepest slide since 2010, while Papa John's International, which also reported soft sales in North America, slumped only 6%. The rout erased $1.7 billion in combined value from those two market capitalizations. Ann Arbor-based Domino's is down 46% from its pandemic peak set in late 21, when demand from customers surged. And that's the thing. During the pandemic, if you could order carryout, you did. And I ordered a lot of carryout, and I made a point of trying to order from local places, and when I could, not chains. I did that a lot. I still do, but I did it a lot at the beginning of COVID. Papa John's shares are off 38% from their high that year. Now the focus is on soaring inflation, which is pushing more people to prepare meals at home rather than pay for delivery. And another problem is that some of the pizza places are gouging on delivery fees. So one of the pizza places I order from charges $6 for delivery on top of the pizza, not counting the tip. It actually goes, here's the pizza, $5.99 delivery fee. Would you like to add a tip? And I don't know if the delivery fee goes to the driver. I don't know. So I got to tip the driver. And by the way, I never delivered pizzas for a living. I never did. It's one thing I never did for a job. Several of my brothers did. I can think of at least, I think 3 of my brothers did. And a couple of them did it for quite some time. So I know all about delivering pizzas. I just don't have any firsthand knowledge of it other than as a consumer. Domino's is grappling with a driver shortage. Executives have been reluctant to tap third-party delivery options such as Grubhub or DoorDash, and instead are seeking to solve that dilemma within the Domino's system. And considering that you're getting hit for a $6 delivery fee already on a pizza, doing it through DoorDash or Grubhub can't be as painful as that, can it? It can't be worse. The quarterly results and forecasts are a large step back in the company's business model and perhaps adds fodder to the bear case that 3PD, that is third-party delivery, has permanently altered the competitive landscape for delivery-centric pizza players for the worse, says an analyst at Citigroup who wrote that in one of those notes those financial guys write. And I remember, I know the entire history of the pizza wars, okay? Grew up in Detroit. There's Domino's and Little Caesars. And then I remember when Domino's started getting out of control, because Little Caesars, I have earlier memories of Little Caesars. When Domino's came along, their whole thing was delivery, delivery, delivery. Remember, we'll get it to you in 30 minutes or less, or your pizza is free. Then they changed it 30 minutes or less, you get a discount, and then later on they just dropped that quietly. The point was that you could order the pizza and have it in hand in 30 minutes. And I remember living in a place where I could almost 50-50 get a free pizza by ordering from Domino's, because it just so happened that the store was over here, my house was here, and it was about the lengths of physics to place the order, make the pizza, throw it in the car, and get it to me. And I remember a couple occasions walking out, opening the door up and looking at my watch, and the guy goes, "No problem, it's free." But I also had one or two drivers who missed by like 5 minutes and go, "No, this isn't late." And I heard later, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I heard later that some stores would penalize drivers if they didn't get the pizza there fast enough, as if it's their fault. But I never argued with them about that, but I remember going, "Look, dude, I know when I placed the order." They go, "Well, right here it says you placed it at 4:00 and it's 4:29. I'm like, "I called it 4:45, whatever." But the point is, I also remember that Little Caesars, when faced with that, and also Domino's eventually, but they all started doing, 2 for 1, pizza. Okay. And it turns out the profit margin is so large on pizzas, you can do that. I mean, the box costs more than the food does, basically. And then they say, "Oh, you only want one, we'll give it to you for half price." Competition is insane in this field. Andrew Charles, a Cowen analyst who rates Domino's market performance, wrote that Thursday's results and guidance justify revisiting the conversation around third-party alternatives. Domino's said it's facing macroeconomic headwinds, particularly in the U.S. delivery business. It reduced its 2 to 3 year targets for global retail sales and unit growth, and said 2023 results for these metrics will be at the bottom end of what they'd expected earlier. Meanwhile, Wednesday is a brutal day for shares in Domino's largest franchisee based on store count, which is an Australia-based company whose value fell 24%, the most since 2005. So things are bad for Domino's of Australia. And it's a crazy situation. But the most interesting thing is I don't know how much of Domino's stock is controlled by the public and investors versus, oftentimes there's like an inner sanctum of people who hold stock. I know at one point in time, Tom Monahan obviously held a big chunk of Domino stock. I heard he sold a lot of it. I don't know if he sold all of it. But investors can often force you to do things you don't want to do as a company if it becomes painfully obvious that what you're doing is not the most economic thing to do for the company, that is, i.e., make money. And so people on the board can come in one day and tell the COO or whoever's in charge, by the way, we're going to replace you unless you do what you're supposed to do here, and then see what happens. So there you go. That's the situation with Domino's, Little Caesars, all of them. Don't forget this weekend, just telling you about this right now, the Detroit Autorama Cobo Hall. It starts today. It happens tomorrow. It happens Sunday. $25 to get in for adults, $10 for kids. Children 5 and under get in for free. Why not bring in the youngins and expose them to cool car culture, along with Flavor Flav and Henry Winkler? And you can go to O'Reilly Auto Parts to get discounted tickets. But that's the Autorama happening this weekend, starting today, then Saturday and Sunday. I'm going to try to get down there. Don't know if I can or not, but I'm going to try to get down there. If I do, I'll take a lot of pictures, maybe shoot some video or something. Who knows? Otherwise, I will talk to you on Monday, as I always do, right here, 11 o'clock until 12 on My Michigan Television, talking about all things pertinent to people in and around or who simply love the state of Michigan as I do so much. So I'll see you on Monday. Bye-bye.
My Michigan TV is streaming everywhere on Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV, and more smart TV apps. My Michigan TV is on your phone, too. Take us with you wherever you go. Just search for My Michigan TV on your favorite app store or visit mymitv.com. All Michigan, streaming everywhere. My Michigan TV.
the heart of winter. It beats inside you. It's that thing urging you outside when the forecast calls for snow. Some were born with it. For others, it was carved with care. But for all who take winter to heart, it's time. Feel the rhythm of the season and pursue your Pure in Pure, Michigan.
Don't miss out. Download the My Michigan TV mobile app to stay up to date with all our programming. Welcome back to My Michigan Television. I'm Steve Lehto. It's a Wednesday. We are under a winter storm warning or watch of some sort. Snow is coming down. It's not that bad just yet, at least what I've seen of it, but a lot of schools are closed and a lot of things are happening, a lot of traffic accidents out the roads. So if you're driving, be careful. But we're finally getting some winter here in Michigan, just in time for the Meyer State Games of Michigan. And last year, I spoke to people from the State Games of Michigan. And we talked about this, and this is a pretty cool thing to do. So joining me now is Eric Engelbart from the Meyer State Games of Michigan. Eric, how are you?
Doing very well. Thanks for having me back.
Well, I'm glad to have you back, and I really enjoyed our conversation last time because what you guys are doing is so cool. We all know about winter sports. We all know about Winter Olympics, for instance, but we never get the chance to participate in them because I might love a sport like skiing or, sledding or ice hockey. I'm not good enough to compete at that level, so I'll never get the chance. And you guys have the State Games of Michigan that are open to people of all walks of life and all manner of skill levels. I think it's a great idea.
That's right. We like to say open to all ages and ability levels, but you don't need to be an Olympian to compete in these Olympic-style games, that's for sure.
So tell me a little bit more about this. I know that there's a bunch of different games that are going to be competitions of, and then there's two different locations. There's an Upper Peninsula location and a Lower Peninsula location. But for instance, this is a lot like the Olympics with, like, say, opening ceremonies and so on. How does that work?
Yes. So a little bit complicated. Let's start from the top here. So we'll run about 19 different sports at 21 different venues, and we do have two hubs this year. So we have a hub up in Marquette. That'll happen the February 10th through 12th weekend. And then we also have a second hub in the Grand Rapids area, February 17th through 19th. So to kick off our Winter Games, just like the Olympics, we do a big opening ceremony where we do a parade of athletes. We do some traditional elements like an oath of the athlete.